The Blue Lagoon, a romance, written by Henry De Vere Stacpoole, is a story that starts with a sense of profound dread and ends with a question about what it actually means to be rescued. It is a tale of isolation, the raw power of nature, and the way human beings adapt when every social rule they have ever known is stripped away. The story begins on a ship called the Northumberland, which is sailing through a heavy, oppressive calm in the Pacific. On board is Arthur Lestrange, a man who is dying of consumption. He is travelling toward California with his 2 young children, Dicky and Emmeline. Because he knows his time is short, Lestrange is terrified of the psychological trauma his death will leave on his children. He makes a secret pact with the ship's captain, Lafarges, to hide the fact of his passing from the children for as long as possible, hoping to shield them from the immediate shock. But the tragedy of the story doesn't start with illness, it starts with fire. A blaze breaks out in the ship's hold, and the situation turns critical when the fire reaches the cargo of blasting powder. In the ensuing chaos, the ship is evacuated in a panic. During the scramble, a thick, disorienting fog bank rolls in, separating a small dinghy from the rest of the fleet. This dinghy carries the 2 children and a sailor named Paddy Button. Shortly after they are separated, the Northumberland explodes in a massive fireball, leaving the small group adrift in a grey, silent void. As they drift through the open ocean, the group's survival depends largely on Paddy Button. He is a rugged, superstitious sailor, but he has a kind heart. He uses storytelling and gentle deception to keep Dick and Emmeline from realizing just how desperate their situation is. They eventually stumble upon the Shenandoah, a derelict timber brig. It is a ghost ship, but it provides them with essential supplies that keep them alive. While other lifeboats from the original shipwreck are mentioned as descending into madness or fighting violently over water, Paddy and the children manage to maintain a fragile peace. Eventually, they navigate through a treacherous coral reef and find themselves in a serene, lush lagoon. This lagoon is a tropical paradise. It is filled with vibrant fruit, fresh water, and a level of beauty that feels almost supernatural. However, the paradise has a dark side. Early on, they discover a human skull, a grim reminder that while the island provides life, it also claims it. It is here that Paddy warns the children about the arita berries, the never-wake-up berries, which he cautions them to avoid at all costs. Over the next several years, the group settles into a primitive, rhythmic existence. Dick and Emmeline grow up entirely outside the influence of civilization. They shed their clothes and the constraints of Victorian society, living in a state of natural nudity and learning to survive by fishing and gardening. Paddy Button remains their guardian, but he struggles with his own demons. He finds a hidden barrel of rum on the island, and his struggle with alcohol leads to a drinking binge that ultimately costs him his life. Paddy dies, leaving the children to survive on their own. This event serves as a turning point. The children realize that the island is not just a playground, but a place of indifference and danger where they are truly alone. As Dick and Emmeline move into adolescence, their relationship undergoes a natural shift. They are no longer just companions or siblings in spirit. They become a passionate couple. Because they have no concept of social taboos, religious laws, or the expectations of a polite society, they view their union as blameless. It is simply part of the island's natural order, mirroring the courtship rituals they observe in the animal kingdom. They build a permanent home out of bamboo in a secluded part of the lagoon, creating a small, private world of their own. Their lives are further complicated when Emmeline becomes pregnant and gives birth to a son whom they name Hannah. The act of raising Hannah reinforces their connection to one another and their commitment to the cycle of life. However, the island continues to test them. A massive cyclone rips through their shelter, destroying their home and forcing them to rebuild. They also face the constant threat of predatory animals. They witness the brutality of nature firsthand, such as a large shark decapitating a fish, and Dick himself is nearly killed during a shark attack while fishing. These moments serve as a constant reminder that the lagoon is a place of duality. It is both a seraphic sanctuary and a violent, indifferent force. The stability of their lives is finally shattered when a shark attacks their small boat. The resulting chaos and a powerful current sweep Dick, Emmeline, and the baby out into the open Pacific. They are once again drifting, separated from the only home they have ever known, moving toward an uncertain fate. At this point, the narrative shifts back to the world of civilization. We learn that Arthur Lestrange did not die on the ship. He survived his illness and has spent the last 8 years obsessively searching the Pacific for his lost children. His grief has been a driving force in his life, but it turns to genuine hope when a retired sea captain shows him a piece of evidence. The captain found a small, familiar child's tea service, belonging to Emmeline, in an abandoned shanty on a remote island. This specific object is the key. It proves that the children were alive and had reached land. Armed with coordinates and a renewed sense of purpose, Lestrange organises an expedition on a schooner called the Rarotonga. As the ship approaches the island, the story takes a philosophical turn. Lestrange begins to struggle with a difficult dilemma. He has spent years wanting his children back, but he starts to wonder if bringing them back to the complexities and cruelties of the modern world would actually be a tragedy. He considers the possibility that they have found a perfect, natural life, free from the corruption and social pressures of the 20th century. The story concludes when Arthur's ship comes across the lifeboat and finds the 3 of them, Dick, Emmeline, and baby Hannah, unconscious and asleep. They have eaten the toxic arata berries, and the book ends on a hauntingly ambiguous note. Arthur asks if they are dead, and the captain replies that they are merely asleep, leaving it uncertain whether or not they can be revived. When we look at the themes of the book, the central tension is clearly the conflict between nature and civilization. Stacpoole was writing at a time when modern science and technology were rapidly changing the world, and he felt that something essential was being lost. By placing Dick and Emmeline in a vacuum, he explores the idea of the noble savage. He suggests that a primitive life lived in harmony with nature is more fulfilling and pure than a life lived within the structured, often hypercritical confines of society. The island itself acts as a character in the story. It represents the duality of existence. On one hand, it is a provider of food, shelter, and love. On the other, it is a place of sudden, mindless violence. The shark attacks and the cyclone aren't presented as evil, they are simply the way of the world. This reflects a very specific philosophical view, that nature is indifferent to human suffering, and that true peace comes from accepting that indifference rather than trying to conquer it. There is also a strong thread regarding innocence and experience. The children's transition from frightened orphans to capable adults happens without the guidance of a teacher or a priest. Their morality is based on instinct and empathy rather than a set of written rules. The fact that they view their romantic relationship as natural and blameless is a direct critique of the social constructs of the time. Stacpoole is asking the reader to consider whether shame is something inherent to the human condition, or something that is taught to us by society. The ending of the book is particularly poignant because it shifts the perspective from the children back to the father. Arthur Lestrange represents the world of civilization, obsessive, grieving, and driven by a need for closure. His arrival on the island represents the inevitable encroachment of the modern world. The question he asks himself, whether it is right to rescue them, is the core of the book's moral inquiry. If the children are happy and healthy in their wild state, is the act of rescuing them actually an act of destruction? Ultimately, The Blue Lagoon is less about the plot of survival and more about the psychological state of being untethered. It examines the loss of wonder that comes with scientific explanation and the potential for human happiness when we are stripped down to our most basic instincts. It posits that while civilization offers safety and structure, it also imposes a set of burdens and anxieties that the inhabitants of the lagoon never had to carry. The story leaves us wondering if the tragedy is the shipwreck that put them on the island, or the rescue that will eventually take them away from it.